I'm Lisa Evers, and this is Street Soldiers.
Fox 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
The Tekashi 6ix9ine gang case is making international headlines. His explosive testimony riveted the courtroom and is sending shockwaves through hip-hop culture. Tekashi's Billboard Hot 100 hit Gummo was released in September 2017. His use of the 9 Trey Bloods gang and their symbolism boosted the song's viral explosion. It began a wild 2-year ride that culminated with Tekashi and 5 9 Trey gang members arrested on federal racketeering, weapons, and drug charges.
Tekashi agreed back earlier in the year to provide as much information as possible to the government to help them ultimately bring down the organization that is the 9 Trey Bloods.
Tekashi's real street cred was always in doubt, but his role as brand ambassador and cash cow for Treyway was never in question, even bringing the gang's brand name into the Fifi video with rap superstar Nicki Minaj. On the witness stand, Tekashi transformed into Daniel Hernandez, who tried to escape the gang in fear for his life.
Because the only way for his cooperation agreement to be valid is if he gives substantial and material information to the government, and it can't be piecemeal.
3 of Tekashi's co-defendants have already pleaded guilty, and the 2 remaining are taking their chances with a jury. Federal prosecutors are using terabytes of evidence, phone calls, social media, pictures, and messages to put the gang out of business, even turning Tekashi's personal driver, Jorge Rivera, into an informant after he was arrested on immigration charges.
Hip-hop's fascination with, Tekashi cooperating, aka snitching, and I think that's what's brought a lot of attention to the case from outside, particularly within the hip-hop community.
Because of his guilty plea, Tekashi is looking at 47 years to life behind bars, but because of his cooperation, he could get out much sooner.
I think it'll be difficult for him to get producers and writers and people that will work with him again.
This is a testimony to what lengths people will go to make it in hip-hop today.
There's a lot more to this, both inside and outside the courtroom. Let's find out what our panel has to say. Joining me is Chuck Creekmur. He's the CEO of allhiphop.com and a hip-hop commentator. Chuck, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Also joining us is TT Torrez. She's a Hot 97 music executive and multimedia personality. TT, great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back, Lisa.
Thanks so much. Also with us is Phillip Hamilton. He's the owner of Phillip Hamilton Law, and he's a criminal defense and civil rights attorney. Phil, great to have you with us again.
Lisa, thank you for having me back.
Thank you. First of all, let's talk about what we're talking about and what everyone's talking about, Phil. This case just seems like it's all over the place. How did this originate?
It originated back actually when we did the last show, Lisa, when we talked about the cooperation agreement that Tekashi had entered into with the government to basically, in part, help them bring down this particular segment of the 9 Trey Bloods, right? So that was back in February of this year. And ultimately he pled guilty, and that was when the huge hoopla about him initially snitching came about, because he had to do so within that plea record in front of the judge. Sentencing was put off until January because ultimately the government knew that they were going to try, at the time they were thinking, the 2 defendants that are on trial now. And they knew that Tekashi, was going to be a huge part of their ultimately being able to bring down both these 2 kind of higher ups that are currently on trial, but then also, to potentially help them bring down others within the organization as well. So that's how we got here. Ultimately, Tekashi was testifying over the course of last week to put himself in a position where, come his January 2020 sentencing date, he would be able to pretty much escape the at least minimum 47 years that he was facing per the charges that he pled guilty to within his indictment. Of course, he was looking at a maximum sentence of life and some change to the extent that the judge decided to go that route.
Right.
But at least to try to, as you noted, get some leniency, the past week or so, everything that we've all been talking about, all of the hoopla, has been centered around him trying to fulfill his deal with the government to be able to get that leniency and try to come under
to
those
reduce it,
47
basically,
years.
he's singing for his freedom.
Big time. He's singing well.
And that's all right.
On key and everything.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to break down the testimony. But Chuck, are you shocked by the reaction of hip hop? Because one minute everyone's trying to get on this guy's social media and get features with him, and then now he's just Snoop Dogg's coming down on him. A lot of big names seem to be, not everybody, but a lot of big names seem to be speaking out on it.
No, I'm not shocked at all. I mean, obviously he was a hot commodity when he was out in the street and causing a ruckus. Even then, he was violating a lot of codes. when he was free. But now that he's a snitch, no one's gonna ride with him in the industry, you know, as far as the heavies. I mean, obviously the fans are a different story, but nobody's gonna stand next to him now that he's, you know, a full-fledged snitch, and that's one thing we don't rock with at all on any level. So, you know, I had a lot of issues with Tekashi when he was out causing mayhem and drama in every city, and it was a poor representation of who we are on this side of things, and I think it was a poor representation of the streets at that point, you know. So
and then also in terms of the culture, TT, you always had questions about him in terms of his significance to hip-hop culture. Why?
Because I always felt that he was living a lie. I always felt like he sold little kids this fantasy, this facade, like I'm this tough guy, you know, where I could tell people to go downstairs and do you know what to private parts, you know what I mean? And causing all type of ruckus in whatever city he went to, like, yeah, I'm in your city, what's up? Bring the drama, always inviting drama, knowing that he was protected by the same people he is now snitching on. And he wasn't this kid in the beginning, and to put that out there and put that energy out there is basically misleading to little kids who looked up to him, which is his fan base. Like, yeah, I'm tough, yeah, I'll smack somebody, yeah, I'll do all of that, knowing that you're not about that life.
Right.
So stop trying to act like you so hardcore, knowing that the streets are only going to lead to two things: death or in jail.
But now this became a very big thing, Phil. When he was first arrested along with the other 9 Trey blood members, there were a lot of federal agencies involved in this too. It was the Homeland Security was involved, the NYPD was involved. There were a lot of different federal ATF. There was a lot in there, and they'd been watching 9 Trey in New York since 2013. So from your perspective and from knowing doing those federal cases, how would they work? Do they see a Tekashi get in the picture and go, wait a minute, we just hit the jackpot here? This is taking the case to a whole other level, or how does that work?
I mean, they could look at him as the jackpot, and I think to the extent from what we saw last week, he was definitely worth some change, right? He, in many parts, I think to your point, TT, was not necessarily a part of that life, like as we put it. I don't think that when we talk about him going to the other cities and causing hoopla everywhere he went and just being so loud and being so boisterous and being so flashy and showy, with respect not just to the entertainment proponent, but also like the violence and like the brass shootings, Barclays, Times Square. These are the kinds of things that I think you can look at almost as a government official and just say, like, this type of person isn't really about that life. And to the extent that we're able to get him, I think we can get more into the actual inner silent workings of the organization, because generally the people who are truly about it, and for lack of a better way to put it, do well within that industry, that illicit industry, are those who are silent. Those who maneuver silently, those who aren't out in the middle of the street being loud, those who aren't bringing a lot of attention. And that was his calling card. So I think once he did come about, he was able to put a spotlight on the organization where it may not have existed before because of the fights out in the middle of the airport in LA. And
these are all in very, and that's the other thing too, TT, you look at, and guys, everyone please feel free to jump in. You look at where these incidents, when I look at the list of incidents, you're looking at the Barclays Center, shooting in near Times Square, an airport. All of these are places where it's very heavily policed, where there's, or at least in terms of surveillance, and very, very, very public, not where you would do something if you didn't want it to be known. What did you think about that, TT?
That's why I always felt like he ordered these hits knowing that he had a higher protection. You know, we see now with the video of his driver coming out saying that he was wired and he was an informant. Like, someone that is ordering these type of hits in broad daylight on 42nd Street, where it is so much tourism happening in that area, doesn't do that without an understanding of, I am going to get caught. Right. Like, there's no way I'm going to get away with this.
There's a police station right there. It's like,
right. So
and there's cops all around because of all the anti-terrorism
right.
things.
So
yeah.
you have to know that, oh, I'm going to be good. These guys I'm telling to do this type of hits, they're not going to be good. They're not so much. Me, I'm going to be good. You know, so as the case unravels and we start to see a lot of the stuff come out, it makes you question, like, you know, his overall intentions from day one. And you also have to he also it has to come a point in his life where he takes responsibility for the actions that he played in all of this.
All right, we're going to continue.
You opted. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
You opt into something knowing what it was,
Right.
right? And the biggest mistake that, you know, the gang members did, and I'm not glorifying their life because gang life is not cool at all, but you let a civilian in knowing that he wasn't built for this, and you did things and you committed crimes in front of him. What do you think he's going to do at the end of the day? So you all have to eat that, and you gotta take the consequences that come with that, and he also has to take the consequences that come with that, because
All right, we're going to continue with this. Tekashi took the stand and was naming some really big names. Who are they, and what does that mean? That's coming up on Street Soldiers.
To the extent that the snitching stopped, I'd be out of business probably next month.
I was in court when one of the days that Tekashi was on the stand, and you could just feel the impact. I felt like there was an earthquake or tsunami or maybe all of the above going through hip-hop at the same time. This guy on the stand looked nothing like the guy that was in Gummo or any of the videos. The colors were gone from the hair. He looked very frail, very tiny. And keep in mind, too, that a lot of members of the gang are, a lot of them at least a decade or more older than him and much bigger, much taller, much more substantial. And then he's there in the blue prison uniform with the white T-shirt and naming names. TT, when you heard the Jim Jones thing, what did you think?
you know, I really couldn't.
Just the fact that he would even he would put those names out there like that.
You know, here's the thing. Like him naming names, and I know he was asked the question, so he has to answer it under oath.
Right.
But for me, I took it as, wow, you're really trying to implicate other people, and why? Like, what's your reasoning for that? And my first thought was perhaps the feds are looking at other cases that they're trying to connect the dots to, and he just kind of put everything together, like the puzzle, the pieces of the puzzle together. And because when I look at, you know, him, you know.
But Mel Murder has known Jim Jones for a long time.
Right.
And in these circles, and especially with it, people are at video shoots. A lot of people show up, that type of thing. But let me just ask Chuck that same question. Chuck, what do you think when you started to hear? I mean, the Cardi thing made no sense whatsoever. But when you started to hear him naming these names, people were going like, "Whoa, wait a minute, this is crazy."
I mean, I just thought he's just going all the way out. He's doing the Sammy the Bull thing. Just going all out and letting it all hang. I mean, also we don't know what they have on him, so I believe it's possible that they have a lot more than they're showing us. And he's on tape, they're on tape, and it's already confirmed. Certain parts of it, at least, are already confirmed, and they need him to go on the stand and then say it.
Phil, when you heard about that, what do you just? And there were a lot of names of the gang members that he was talking about as well, who are not famous, so people weren't paying attention to them. But how much quote unquote snitching does he have to do in order to get his sentence reduced? Or do the prosecutors go to him and say, or to his attorney and say, listen, we need this or we need that, or this is what we're gonna break it down? Like, does he know in advance?
Yeah, this has all been broken down well in advance. I mean, when he entered into the 5K1 cooperation agreement, and when you read the text of 5K1, when you're talking about, is he just singing just to sing? Is he doing the Sammy the Bull? Why is he throwing all these names out?
And just to interrupt you there, so we all know what you're talking about. Is that what you call the cooperation letter?
Correct. Yeah,
that's when people become a government witness.
Correct. Like, that's kind of like the legal terminology behind, like, you becoming a snitch or you becoming a cooperator, right? Like, you enter into that agreement with the government. They, post-trial, they're not going to ultimately agree to give you any leniency
in advance.
Right. They're not going to give you the leniency. They'll let you know pretty much what they need to know, which is everything. All that you can tell them. Don't come in there and, just here's a little of this, here's a little of that.
You got to open up.
You got to open up. And sometimes what's going to happen is people are going to open up like, oh, we didn't even need that, but thanks. Right. And to the extent that ultimately the government can say thanks, that's going to come out in their motion pre-January 20th before Tekashi goes in for sentencing, to ultimately be able to get his leniency. So, for me, this was not a surprise. And when we're talking about people, we're just like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this happening. Let's define people. That's hip hop. I think a lot of those jurors, and you have to remember the Southern District is made up of the counties of Rockland, Dutchess, Westchester. We're talking about very
mature
conservative
and very
upstate counties,
Yep.
correct? So when they're coming in there, Cardi B, Jim Jones, it
Meant
doesn't mean
nothing to
anything.
them, right.
You can name any name. They're not ultimately going to know. So they're just looking at this as your standard run-of-the-mill racketeering conspiracy trial. It's hip-hop that is like taking this to the level of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he did that. But for those of us who are in the industry of defending people that end up in these kinds of situations, to the extent that the snitching stopped, I'd be out of business probably next month. It happens all the time. This is exactly how the government generally is able to carry through its objectives.
I have friends who I know will die for me or bleed for me, but everybody is not like that.
What do you guys think in terms of the impact on hip hop? Just to see a figure that big in terms of his following out there in this criminal, is there going to be any impact, Chuck?
Oh, I think it's, listen, for me, for all hip hop, this is great. Like,
Lots of
traffic
views,
is
right?
up, people are talking, so this is great. I mean, Tekashi, unfortunately, has always been that type of figure that gets people talking. I think that, he's snitching, that's a bad thing, so to speak, but that's the life. From a music point of view, I don't think he's going to be able to make music anymore. I mean, he may be able to do it from a safe house or somewhere. You know what I mean?
A safe house.
A safe house. You don't need the
An undisclosed location.
You can't find him.
Right.
TT, but what about that? In terms of the impact on the culture, do you have concerns that this is going to have shaped the way, especially internationally now?
Yeah,
People are looking
I
at
think it will have an impact on the culture. I think anyone that is associated with a gang or have any type of affiliation, they're going to be watching. I think that he also gave them the blueprint of how certain things worked. From the inside. So yeah, I think it will have an impact on the culture. Will he be able to make music? I think where he's going to have a problem, how should I say this? I think where the problem is going to come in at is that it's going to be hard for him to find producers, writers, other artists that will work with him, because a lot of them won't stand next to him.
Do you think they'll be shamed if honestly, do you think they'll be shamed?
Yeah, I think some of
shamed
them
if
will.
they publicly shamed if they work with him?
Absolutely. I think so. His fans are really naive. A lot of them are. A lot of them are also little kids who have never remotely bust a grape in a fruit fight. Exactly. So they don't really understand this type of talk, although they have Twitter fingers and Instagram fingers, and they think that they do, but they really don't. I think
bad influence on them.
I think that he had a real influence on them. I'm curious to see how this will shake out once he gets out. So I think he will have some issues.
On that note, I just want to say something real quick. I hope and I pray, we've seen this before similarly, that this is a cautionary tale for those kids that you speak of, that these kids can understand that there are ramifications for putting everything on social media. There are ramifications for provoking people. There are ramifications for being affiliated, and you're not about that.
Yeah, but if he gets out soon and turns out to be even bigger than before,
but
that's
on the flip
what kind of
side,
cautionary tale is that? He's even more now he's got
people,
I was arrested, I was.
Yeah, but people on the other side.
You think the snitch label is not gonna?
They need to vet who they bring in. You have to vet people. Like there's again back to I have friends who I know will die for me or bleed for me, but everybody is not like that.
I want to thank you for being with us. Chuck Creekmur, great to have you with us again. Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
TT, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us. TT Torrez and Phillip Hamilton, great to have you back, and thank you for helping us understand all of this.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
We really appreciate it. And thank you for watching this episode of Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. Let's push for peace.